With the first patch of set 12 being out for quite a bit of time now, we're starting to see the meta settle. Syndra 3 with Wukong 3, Syndra 3 with Mordekaiser 3, Syndra 3 with Mage Spat playing around Vex 3, Syndra 3 with Swain 3. Yo, oh wow, what a meta! Oh, great! But also, obviously, Katarina reroll, Kog'Maw reroll, and if you're not playing any of those, Karma Lottery. So far, that is sort of people's sort of disdain right now, right? Even though there are a bunch of other playable lines that are augment dependent, things like Portal Spat with Vertical Portal, Eldritch, you get the idea. We did a whole tier list before. But in today's video, I got something new for you guys. We are watching a reroll comp today. Oh god, it's reroll, but it's a comp I've never seen before. It is actually straight up. I have not seen this before, and I will not spoil what it is, but we will be watching none other than Spicy Appies. One of the household names in North America. I don't know about household. I don't think TFT is that big, but one of the staple names in the North American TFT scene. He's very, very well respected within the scene. Very much, in my opinion, known to be a cook. Really good at cooking up new ways to play the game, new reroll lines. He's quite a bit of the innovator because that's what he likes to do. He likes to just play really odd lines, if you will, and maybe the less popular ones, but they're definitely way more fun and way more creative. Going into the game here, we're already kind of given a pretty strong mage start, and I think a lot of people are starting to think about Veigar from a spot like this, especially with the tier opener. Veigar right now is currently meta, but it's slowly shifting further and further down the tier list, if you ask me, just because it takes too long to scale up, and I think people are becoming much better at punishing the early and mid game, where Veigar is going to be the most vulnerable, and that's when you bleed out the most. So I can understand a bit being apprehensive of not actually playing around the Veigar here. We do have Zoe, one of the best one costs right now to play around. Also opens up a potential line to play around Zoe reroll, which in my opinion is fucking dog shit, unless you have Spellblades, by the way. So that shit was not that woke. We decided not make 10 here, and actually we get a Nila pair out of the Orb of Kassadin, and a bunch of other trash really, and our two augments are too healthy, Warrior Crest and Martyr. Now, I think a lot of people in this spot would just auto-click too healthy. They would just auto-click too healthy, not give a flying fuck, and just say, me Kassadin, that's it. I got the Kassadin first, haha, you lose. I played stage 1 better, not really. And they just pick too healthy, and they just play multi-strikers. And quite honestly, that's a very viable, and I would argue, correct decision. But in this spot, Appies is a cook. He actually rerolls it first. He gets Support Golem and Raining Gold. Now, Support Golem, hello, where are the augments? Look at the augments. Support Golem is the best performing gold augment. It is basically an auto click. You never ever not click on Support Golem. But I would not be making a video about this if Appies was playing a typical line. Just to give you an idea, Support Golem 1 is a 3.83 at 2-1 in currently Diamond Plus, but Warrior Crest is actually a 5.3. It's a 5.3, and he hasn't rerolled this. And Appies, being fucking Appies, says, fuck it, I have 2 Nilas, why not play some Warriors? And again, this augment averages up. He turned down an augment that averages a 3.8 for an augment that averages a 5.3. Now, if the game was incredibly balanced, right? All these different reroll lines and potentials or whatever are available to you, right? If TFT was a perfect game, I could understand the situation. I could understand this decision making. You do have a couple Nilas. You could definitely tempo with Warriors a little bit. You have a Hodge Slam, right? But we also had a QSS Slam, and we could also maybe put it around Kassadin. So, like, I don't know. The fact that the game is not balanced shows just how inherently incorrect this Warrior Crest decision is. But if the game was balanced, and we could play around literally whatever, then yeah, I could see the Warrior Crest being taken here, especially with the item slams that we have, because at the end of the day, QSS is really an item you only slam on Kassadin and not really anybody else, at least currently at the time of recording this video. So we are currently sitting here trying to make 20, sitting pretty. We got a Nila pair, we got the Akalis, and our board is quite honestly not that bad. At the end of the day, we're still gonna preserve HP, but like, is it a strong board? No. Is it a good board? No. Does their spot look like an 8th? Yes. So what the fuck, you know? So you might be watching this spot, you might be going, well, hold on a minute. Well, you know, Appies is not a moron. This guy's very smart. He's very creative and a very good player. Surely he's playing Nila reroll, right? Surely. We took Warrior Crest. It has to be Nila reroll. Come on, man. Everyone's seen this shit before. This was the meta comp during the beta. This is the, like, during the PvE, people were playing this Eternia on Project PvE. This isn't news. My friend, this is news. He's not playing around Nila 3. No, sir. I'll spoil a little bit for you. He's not playing around Nila 3. In this game, with the Katarina on our board, we are thinking about Katarina reroll. This unit is a pile of shit. And let me tell you why. Katarina reroll is not a popular comp for the big reason that Katarina, and you can watch it during this fight, watch how she dashes. She will cast here and cast right into the middle of the board. Smack dab dibbity dop right in front of the entire enemy carries and just die. She will get one cast off, then die. So the problem is that this Katarina is low-key a suicide bomber. She is going in there to cast, pop shit up, fuck it up, and if she doesn't get her job done, she will die. And that is the big problem with Katarina reroll. It just, this unit feels terrible, especially in the early game as an early game item holder, especially if your tanks lose aggro, then Katarina just dies even faster because the tanks die and then Katarina gets focused down immediately and now you don't have a carry anymore. Look at the damage charts, by the way. Look at this. 355. 355. This Katarina did less damage than Ash 1. It's a 3-cost unit. So this is the problem with Katarina and why it's not very popular. By the way, I apologize. I have very dry mouth today. The air is very dry where I'm at. But going back to the game here, you might be wondering, okay, so then why the fuck would Appy's ever play Katarina? Like, surely, like, is he diseased or something? Like, we got a sword here. Maybe we can make Slam BT or something. I don't know. But keep in mind, this Warriors line, there is some good units inside of the line. Specifically, Fiora 2. Fiora 2 is it's really the secondary carry inside of the Karma line. If you don't know already, the Karma line, the main line right now is for Witchcraft, where you play around Karma Fiora, and you play for Witchcraft, and Fiora is a very, very strong secondary carry, and then Gwen actually becomes a tertiary carry because she's actually a warrior. So now from the spot with the Hodge BT Slam, we're definitely thinking, okay, we want to play around potentially the Fiora, or we can maybe play around Neela 3 if we happen to find it, but we've been sitting on this Neela pair since like stage 1, so like the odds of it happening is not very high. So we could stay on 6 and try to roll for this Neela, but we're already itemized like the casting a little bit, and it's not like our board's necessarily that weak. But anyways, before I continue that point, 3-2 Augment, Young, Wild, and Free, branching out, and team building. Out of all of this stuff right here, none of it's very good, to be completely honest. If you're playing reroll, team building can be fine, but typically speaking, if you are playing a reroll comp, you don't ideally want to ever take team building because you should be in a position where you're already postured to hit all your units, so you don't actually need the econ from your silver augment. That's not always the case, but it is sometimes the case. So you could take team building here. He rerolls middle and looks like he gets the golden remover Pandora's items. None of that great. And as you can see, because of his mouse hovering over, he actually ends up going with team building. Again, not necessarily that great. We did get a cat pair ideally out of our shop just now, which is great. And actually, because Appy's is very prudent, he actually decides to dupe the Katarina on this turn to make sure that he has a Katarina too, and then he can use that to tempo throughout the mid game and then just be okay with it. So sorry for the spoiler a little bit. I know he hasn't done it yet, but it's like very easily the correct decision. This dupe, if it sits on your bench, the longer it sits on your bench, the less and less value you get out of it is what I'm trying to say. And he knows he's getting a dupe later anyway, so when he's trying to find that last copy, it's not going to be that much harder. So he rolled just a slight bit, tried to find some way to cap his board a little bit. He found the Hecarim, which is really nice, gives him bash and multis, but also it pairs very nicely inside of this current line here because Hecarim is actually a pretty decent carry for the mid game. There's been a lot of times where I've played the mid game and I've seen people playing around like a Hecarim 2, just because like Hecarim is a 2-star 3-cost. That is an 8A melee unit that is very good at being up in your face, and with multi-striker active, does a lot of work. So, despite the fact that, yeah, Hecarim is not really one of those units you really think about as a carry throughout the mid-game, it's still decent enough that you can still itemize around it and still play okay with it and use it as an item carry all the way to Fiora. As you can see here, again, this Hecarim is doing more work than this Katarina. This is a Katarina 2, which ulted right at the beginning of the fight, and it insta-died again. So, again, I'm not a believer of this comp necessarily, but it does goes to show that, hey, just because a comp isn't necessarily meta, doesn't mean it's necessarily bad if your spot is good for it. And I think Appy's, again, this guy is known to cook, and he's good at cooking because he can identify spots that are good enough to get away with these shabbier lines, but he can still top 4 with it. Pretty respectively. And again, at the end of the day, no matter what you're playing, whether it's a subpar line, whether it's a non-meta line, whether it's a C tier line, if your spot is good for the line, you can definitely play it for sure. You shouldn't deny potential possibilities and potential outlandish chances just because, you know, oh, I heard this shit was bad, or I heard the streamer talking shit about it. You know, like at the end of the day, TFT rewards flexibility. And as long as you are prudent with the way that you are approaching your flexibility, the game will reward you certainly. And that's exactly what Appy's does. Again, he's Did I say again twice? My bad. But Appies is so good at finding these spots. Finding these spots that he's already, by the way, 6 Katarinas. And identifying that, hey, it's very possible to play this, especially in a reroll heavy meta, where when you're talking about Syndra, you're talking about the current meta lines right now, 3-cost frontliners are like in, right? If this was a fashion statement, they're in right now. Like, everyone wants to play around like a 3-star 3-cost for their frontline. Whether that's Wukong 3, Mordekaiser 3, Nico 3, Swain 3, whatever it may be, they're all very, 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 very strong. And so because he knows that about the current meta, he knows it's very, very easy to hit Katarinas, a unit that literally nobody or their mother is going to try to hold onto. So yeah, this spot is actually pretty not bad at all. We're already 7 for Katarinas at 4-1. We could potentially hit a Katarina 3 pretty soon. Spark or Rabadons makes the most sense. Katarina is our AP carry. Spark is fine. We do have a lot of damage amp coming from our trade already from Warriors. So this is acceptable. I think Spark is good. I think Rabadons is fine. I think it's close regardless. I think personally I would have went with Rabadons, but it is what it is. Moonlight Ritual gives us a Nila 3 for this fight, which is super nice. It gets to preserve our streak here. We're 92 HP, and again, when you're playing flexibly, I should also note that as long as you have a lot of HP, you can do whatever the fuck you want. So as long as it preserves you HP and you're playing strongly, like, you should be okay. But finally going here, Hero Grab Bag, Combat Caster, and Mentorship. If there's anything to take away from this video, even if you were watching this whole thing, you're like, I'm not learning jack squat, let me leave you with this. If you take Hero Grab Bag when you already have team building, you are stupid. It's dumb. It's never justified to give up the power of 2 augment slots just for some mini dupes. So don't ever do that, okay? It's never Hero Grab Bag in this spot. I'm pretty sure if you take both of those in the same game, you're averaging like a 7. It's actually that terrible. Don't click it. Combat Caster, Mentorship makes the most sense here. Mentorship, I think, is the higher AVP based off the 2. Mentorship is a 4.24 currently at 4.2, and Combat Caster is a 4.3. Mentorship also just makes a lot of sense here because it's very easy for us to get Mentorship onto our Katarina 3 and potentially a Hecarim 3, depends on the way that we play here. But we're going to reroll middle and right side for sure. See what else do we get here. Vertically inclined, and we also get Unified Resistance. Unified is actually pretty decent in this spot as well because everything is going to be up in center and is going to be face taking a lot of damage. So Unified actually gets a lot of value here, especially when it comes to Warriors. You're kind of just positioning everything within the first 2 rows. So Mentorship is good, but Unified I can see being better. And he actually rerolls left side here and he ends up getting Unified. So that is pretty interesting to see. Again, I still think Mentorship makes a lot of sense, but this is fine as well. It looks like we already get a Fiora out of the orb here, and notice how he's not rolling, by the way. Even though we are pretty close to Katarina 3, and we only need 1 more copy, we are still waiting on that mini dupe, so it doesn't make too much sense to be rolling here. But I could see the argument to level to 8 here, and roll like a slight bit, trying to just like get a little more power into our board. But because it is 4-2, a lot of people are rolling down trying to find really strong like spikes, and this is usually the time when, like, if you have like a decent board that streaks you all the way through stage 2 and 3, stage 4 is when you're really gonna fall off. So it is pretty interesting to see that Appies actually opts to not level here, which are understandable. He's gonna be a bit poor, but not leveling here just so he can preserve a little bit of that extra econ so that when he does roll, he can not only find Katarina 3, but Fiora 2 potentially, along with a Gwen. And by finding all of those, we're going to be playing 6 Warrior with a Katarina 3 ideally and a Fiora 2 as our secondary. So really interesting spot to be in. Again, Appy's just cooking up a fucking masterclass. Unfortunately, loses 4-2 and 4-3. It is expected. Our board is pretty shabby, all things considered, despite the fact that we have so many upgraded units on our board and our HP looks fine. But again, stage 4 is when everybody is truly spiking. On this carousel here, I think ideally we would have gotten something like the Fiora with the cloak. I think that would have been okay. Belt is fine as well. That gives us an Evan Shroud. But Fiora is a very, again, just like Karma, Fiora is a really difficult unit to find. So trying to find that last Fiora 2 is going to be really, or sorry, not Fiora 2. Fiora 2 alongside the Gwen 2 is going to be really tough. So we'll see how well we can find it. But it looks like we were able to find a Callista, which is great. That gives us Fairy as well for our Fairy Crown. It looks like we also have the mini dupe as well, which we just got from a silver augment. And despite, you know, we're kind of poor, we're Callista 1, Gwen 1. The spot's actually not that bad. It's not good, but we're paired with everything, so it would be very smart for us to just keep donkey rolling here until we find at least like an upgrade or 2. So it looks like we actually do end up finding the Fiora 2, which is great, and we also find the Katarina 3 on the same turn. So now we're actually pretty online. Like, all things considered, we're actually hella online. So you might have also noticed he was holding the Hecarims as well, because he was kind of like angling Hecarim 3, which I've heard rumors about, but I've never actually seen it before, but I've heard it's actually kind of okay. So I could see him trying to hold like Hecarim and Katarina, trying to go for both, but he, you know, this turn he does want to spike, and he does know he's playing like an offbeat line, so preserving HP whenever possible is ideal, and by selling the Hecarim 2 here, he's able to transfer items over. Yes, we do have an Evan Shroud on the Fiora, but all things considered, the spot is still fine. Now, Evan Shroud on Fiora is also really interesting, because I personally would never slam Evan Shroud on Fiora. I think that is stupid as fuck, but Appies is like a Evan Shroud enjoyer. This guy truly loves Evan Shroud from the bottom of his heart, and he actually has no problem slamming Evan Shroud on Fiora. He was even talking about it on the stream. His reasoning is, like, in my opinion, questionable, but because I just think that, like, sure, like, when it comes to, like, Armor Shred, like, you would kind of want the stats from Last Whisper. They're just objectively better. But he's like, listen, Evan Shroud's really not that much worse. And I guess his rationale is, listen, Last Whisper good, Evan Shroud is just not as good, but it's acceptable. And I don't know how I fully feel about that, but it's okay. But I mean, at the end of the day, regardless, we're still winning this fight, which is insane. By the way, positioning really, really nice. Our Fiora actually ends up wrapping into the backline, killing the Veigar, which, if she was stuck on the front line here, we definitely would not have won this fight. So, already seeing the first person going out into 8th place, which is Balfam. And, again, our spot is fine. We're actually turbo rich as well. In case you haven't noticed, Appies has been rolling every turn since the beginning of Stage 5 to try and find combat charms. When it comes to charms in set 12, you really need to be prudent about the charms that you buy starting in Stage 5, because you get to see a charm every other roll, right? And then if you have Xerath, you might see a charm every roll. So you really want to be able to maximize the power of your board by buying charms whenever you can, which means making sure that you have some level of economy that is available to you when you are playing Stage 5 onwards, late game for TFT. So that's also why you might notice that even though he's so close to leveling to 9, he'd rather be buying combat charms here, because those combat charms can actually be the difference in a lot of fights, and those fights add up. Let's say you're losing like 10, 12, 15 HP a fight, right? 2 fights, you could lose up to 30. It's a lot of fucking HP to be losing. And if that is a charm diff, which in a lot of cases it can be, you really want to make sure that you are you save HP as much as possible. Like, even right now, we just lost one pretty badly. But, you know, depending on the charm, we actually could have been a lot closer and preserve significantly more HP. So, level 9, you might also notice, is just a lot more rare in set 12. Level 10, I don't even think... I've seen it maybe like once or twice, a handful of times, from like egregiously high roll positions. But level 10 is truly rare as fuck, and level 9 is very rare in a lot of games. Again, you are just rolling every turn during Stage 5 to try to find these charms. I know a lot of pro players, especially at the highest level, are sort of complaining about this mechanic just because it does feel a bit bad having to roll 4 combat charms, and there's no real, like, elegant solution, really, except for nerfing charms in Stage 5 and Stage 6, and onwards, I guess. Just because if you do so, then, like, you don't feel as much of a pressure to have these combat charms. But even then, they still can be the difference maker. These are basically mini augments that you can purchase every single round. But regardless, having the agency in the mid game and the late game especially, I still think it's really nice. It does feel pretty bad sometimes when you're playing the late game and you roll. I've had this one game before where I rolled infinite. I had like 30 gold on level 9 trying to find a combat charm, and I didn't hit a single combat charm after like all of my rolls. So you can definitely find yourself in positions like that, especially when you're trying to preserve HP, just as Appies is here. So, like, at the end of the day, late game charms, they're cool, but like, could they be better slightly? Just nerf them a little bit in power, and I think actually most people will be pretty happy campers. But who knows? At the end of the day, I feel like with TFT, people are always complaining about something. So it is what it is. But looks like, anyways, going back to the game here, top 4 secured. Looks like Andre, or Box has unfortunately ended up in 5th place. NCTN in 6th, Quizmice in 7th, and Balfam, who we have already covered. We don't have to, you know, pour salt in the wound. Leadership here is good enough. Not necessarily a fantastic charm, but it's fine. I think we could level here if we really wanted to, which I don't think is bad at all. We could tech in the Arcana for the Xerath for extra true damage. But I think Appies is sort of scouting this opponent's board. And this, by the way, this is a ridiculous board. Syndra 3, Mordekaiser 3, Support Golem, pumping up Silver Mentorship. So everything is good about this guy's board, and yet somehow we're still winning. Take that, just let that sink in for a second. This guy has a Radiant item, Syndra 3, with good items. Plus a Mordekaiser 3, one of the best front lines you could ask for this comp. This is like the most meta line, it has the highest AVP compared to any other comp that currently exists. And yet this 6 warrior comp is beating it. Just let that sink in. That is insane. Talk to anybody who's playing TFT right now. Like, oh, it's Syndra lottery, you can't play anything else. But this 6 warrior comp is looking kind of solid. It's looking solid. The Katarina is getting the cast off, but she is exploding and doing damage in the meantime. So, all things considered, this comp with a warrior crest, not that bad. Again, obviously, Appy's like recognized that his spot was good for it. This is not a composition I can see like most people forcing, but it's still a comp that you can definitely consider and, you know, have it as a tool inside of your arsenal to try and win fights. Because at the end of the day, the way that these warriors dash, they can do some egregious shit. Whether it's the way that Fiora just dashes or wraps into the backline, whether it's the way that Gwen wraps into the backline, whether it's the way that Katarina just pops her head in and it fucking just spins to wins and kills all this shit on the board. This comp can do some egregious bullshit. Like genuinely. And I think at the end of the day, this is a comp that you should at the very least know. Keep it in the back of your head and think, you know what, there are going to be times where this line is viable and maybe I should consider it. One last thing to note real quick, you might notice Appy's also has 6 Fioras. So we are also considering multitudes of outs here, whether that be like the Zerat 2, just trying to find, you know, a couple more upgraded units as well. But Fiora 3 also being a potential out is great. I think at the end of the day, the way that he positions here is really, really crucial as well, because you might notice his Fiora and his Gwen are actually on the far sides of the board. And because they're on the far sides of the board, that gives a potential for the... Oh, Jesus Christ, what is this red-ass dildo? But, like, it gives a lot of potential for these units to just wrap into the back and really, like, cause a lot of... You know, cause a scene, for lack of a better term. But it looks like at the final fight here, it looks like it's actually positioning in the middle, which is interesting. I would assume you position on the outside so that it can dash eventually go into the back. But look at the Fiora positioning right here. Holy fuck. And the Gwen just snipped the backline and the Karma as well. My god. You could argue it might have been an obelisk this, but at the end of the day, it's still a first. A first is a first. LP's LP. And just well played to Abby for playing this really, really interesting and just unique line, all things considered. But thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys learned something. Take care and happy climbing.